Okay, so have you ever just stopped and wondered why some of the smartest people, maybe even brilliant minds, seem to constantly struggle with money?
Yeah, and then on the flip side, you see others, maybe with way less, formal financial training,
Hmm.
somehow end up building real wealth.
It's a total paradox, isn't it? But
Correct.
I think what we're diving into today really unpacks that because wealth, it turns out, isn't just about math or spreadsheets. It's profoundly about behavior.
It really is, and it's fascinating how much emphasis we put on the technical side of finance. When the truth is, our financial lives, they're driven so much more by our feelings.
Fear, pride.
Greed, patience, all those emotions, they shape the decisions we make way more than pure smarts or even having the perfect strategy.
Exactly. And that is precisely what we're getting into today. Welcome, everyone. This is our deep dive into Morgan Housel's, well, really groundbreaking book, The Psychology of Money.
It's such a good one.
It is. We're going to unpack 20 of his timeless lessons, and they really challenge how you might think about your own finances, maybe reshape things a bit.
Yeah, the goal here really is to understand why getting rich and maybe even more importantly, staying rich,
Mm.
there's just two totally different skills.
Right. And why that long-term financial success, it hinges so much more on your mindset, your behaviors, than, say, how much you earn.
And Morgan Housel,
Mhm.
he's not your typical finance guru type. That's kind of why his stuff hits home for so many people, I think.
Yeah, tell us a bit about him. He used to write for the Motley Fool, right? And the Wall Street Journal.
Exactly. But his real strength, what makes his insights so powerful, is he's an incredible storyteller.
Yeah.
He just gets money isn't some abstract thing. It's like woven into our deepest human experiences, our emotions.
And clearly it struck a nerve. I mean, what, over 2 million copies sold?
Yeah, huge.
It's become this sort of go-to guide for, well, everyone, from seasoned investors right down to people just trying to figure out their budget.
But it's important to say this isn't some get rich quick guide or anything.
No, not at all.
It's more about cultivating a better way, a more thoughtful way of thinking about money for the long haul, for life, really.
So let's jump in. One of Housel's absolute core ideas is why behavior is just so much more important than raw intelligence when it comes to money. And he starts with this really liberating concept he calls "no one's crazy."
Oh, yeah. This one's big.
What's the shift in perspective there? It sounds simple, but it's quite deep.
It really is profound.
Okay.
What House was saying is that, look, every single financial decision anyone makes, it's shaped by their own unique life experiences.
Yeah.
Your personal history with money.
Okay, like give me an example.
Well, think about someone who lived through, say, really high inflation or maybe the Great Depression. Their whole outlook on money, on risk, on saving, it's going to be fundamentally different from someone who's only known, stable growth.
Right. So their actions might look irrational to someone else.
Exactly. To an outsider, it might seem overly cautious or maybe even illogical. But from their perspective, based on what they've lived through, it's a completely natural, understandable response.
That makes a lot of sense. It sort of removes the judgment.
Totally. It's not just about understanding other people better, though that's part of it. It's also about freeing ourselves, understanding that our own financial quirks or anxieties, they're probably a direct result of our own unique journey. It's okay.
That is powerful. It takes away some of that self-criticism.
Hmm.
Okay, so building on that idea of things maybe outside our direct control, Housel also talks a lot about luck and risk. How big a role did these play? They feel kind of intangible.
Oh, they're huge. Absolutely monumental. And we tend to really underestimate them, I think.
More than we realize.
Definitely. Housel points out, yeah, hard work, brilliance, those are key. But luck, it's undeniably a massive factor in many, many outcomes.
He uses Bill Gates as an example, right?
He does. I mean, Gates' genius is undeniable, obviously.
Yeah.
But he also had this incredible stroke of luck, right? Attending one of the very few high schools in the entire world at that specific time that had a computer students could actually use.
Wow, I didn't know that detail.
Yeah, so that unique access, that piece of luck, it intersected with his talent and drive and, well, the rest is history. It's just a powerful reminder to acknowledge chance. And also, crucially, to be aware of the flip side, the inherent dangers of risk. Things can go wrong even if you do everything right.
Okay, so luck and risk are big factors. Now, here's where I think it gets really, really practical. Housel draws this sharp line between the skills you need to get wealthy versus the skills you need to stay wealthy. They sound similar, but he says they're fundamentally different.
All completely different worlds. Yeah. Getting rich, I mean, that often requires taking big risks, right?
Mm.
Being bold, maybe being optimistic, innovating.
Putting yourself out there.
Exactly. But staying rich. Housel argues that demands a whole different set of virtues. Things like humility, for one.
Humility, how so?
Well, recognizing that maybe some of your success was luck, not just genius, and knowing that the same risk that made you could also break you. It also requires intense frugality sometimes and real discipline.
So it's less about finding the next big thing and more about defense.
Pretty much. It's about avoiding ruin, avoiding the big mistakes. There's a great quote he uses: "Getting money requires taking risks. Keeping money requires humility." The deep insight there is that preserving wealth is often less about brilliant moves and more about just recognizing your own potential to mess things up and guarding against it.
That's a sobering thought. And when we look at those huge success stories like the billionaires, it's often not this smooth, steady climb, is it? Housel calls this tails drive everything. What does he mean by tails?
Right, the tails of those extreme events, the outliers. What he's saying is that most financial success, especially the really big successes, doesn't come from steady, average returns day after day. It usually comes from a few significant moments or investments that have an outsized impact. These are the tail events.
Okay, like one or two massive wins.
Exactly. Or maybe avoiding one or two massive losses. He uses Warren Buffett again. It's astonishing, but something like 99% of Buffett's net worth was accumulated after his 50th birthday.
99% after 50.
Yeah. It underscores the point. Most of his journey was good, solid, but the truly massive wealth came later, driven by the compounding effect over decades and those powerful tail events working in his favor. The takeaway isn't to chase lottery tickets, but to understand the importance of just staying in the game long enough for those infrequent but powerful events to happen. Patience is key.
So if we manage to stay in the game, play that long game, what's the ultimate prize? Housel argues freedom is the highest dividend. That really reframes the goal, doesn't it? Away from just stuff.
It absolutely does. He makes a powerful case that the ultimate form of wealth isn't the mansion or the yacht or, keeping up with the Joneses.
It's not about status symbols.
No. The highest dividend money can pay, he says, is control over your time, your most precious, non-renewable resource. It's the ability to wake up in the morning and say, what do I want to do today? Not what you have to do because of financial pressure.
That sounds like true wealth. Just having that choice.
That's what Housel contends is the most profound form of financial independence, that feeling of control.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. Beyond just getting and keeping money, Housel really digs into how our mindset, just how we think, can be more valuable than actual material things. He even says something quite radical: save money without a reason. That flies in the face of most advice, right? Save for a down payment, save for retirement.
It totally does. We're always told, have a goal. What are you saving for?
Mm.
But Housel flips it. He argues that savings' primary value isn't tied to a specific future purchase.
So what is it tied to?
Flexibility, optionality, building a buffer. The real intrinsic value of saving is simply having options tomorrow that you don't have today.
Like an emergency fund, but broader.
Broader, yeah. It's about being able to handle unexpected setbacks, sure, but also being able to seize unexpected opportunities. Or maybe just changing your mind about your career or where you live without a financial crisis ensuing. That peace of mind, that flexibility is the reason. The goal is the cushion itself.
I like that. The cushion is the goal. And this seems connected to his idea of choosing what's reasonable, rational. What if doing something feels right emotionally, even if it's not, like, mathematically optimal? Paying off the mortgage early is a classic example.
Exactly. This is where finance gets deeply personal, not just numerical. Textbook rationality might say, don't pay off your 3% mortgage early, invest that money, you'll earn more.
Right. The spreadsheet says invest.
The spreadsheet says invest, but Housel says, hold on. If paying off that mortgage, even if it's low interest, brings you immense peace of mind, if it lets you sleep at night, reduces your stress, makes you feel secure, that emotional return is incredibly valuable, maybe even more valuable than the potentially higher financial return.
So do what works for you.
Yes. Do what lets you stay sane and stick with the plan long term. Prioritize what feels reasonable and sustainable for you, not just what looks perfect on paper. Emotional well-being often trumps pure rationality in real life.
That feels really empowering, actually. And then there's this zinger. Wealth is what you don't see. This completely flips how society usually thinks about wealth, right?
Right.
We see the fancy car, the big house.
Right. We equate wealth with visible spending. But Housel draws a supercritical distinction here. That luxury car, that's not wealth. That's money spent. It's gone.
It's an indicator of past income, maybe, but not current wealth.
Precisely. True wealth, he argues, is invisible. It's the money you haven't spent. It's the savings, the investments, the assets working for you behind the scenes.
He gives an example, doesn't he?
Yeah, the classic example of the unassuming millionaire driving, like, a 10-year-old Toyota. Their wealth isn't in the car they drive. It's in the portfolio they've built, the financial security they have. It's the choices they've retained, because they didn't spend it all on outward displays.
Okay, so let's talk about building that unseen wealth, the long game, compounding and patience. Housel really emphasizes the power of compounding. Sounds almost magical, but it's just math, right? Though maybe counterintuitive math.
It is incredibly powerful, yeah. And I think it's underestimated because it's so quiet. It works slowly, silently over long periods. It defies our human craving for, instant results.
He uses Buffett again here, doesn't he, to show the sheer scale over
He
time.
does. And it's mind-blowing. Even though Buffett started investing ridiculously young, like age 10, by the time he hit 60, he had actually accumulated less than 10% of the wealth he has today.
Less than 10% by age 60, after investing for 50 years.
Crazy, right? The vast, vast majority came after that, from the decades of compounding that followed. The insight isn't that you need to be an investing genius from day one. It's that you need the patience, the sheer endurance to let time do its heavy lifting.
Which leads directly to his point about time timing. We're always hearing about, is now a good time to buy, or should I sell before the crash? Housel seems to say that's mostly noise.
Yeah, largely a distraction. You absolutely do not need to predict the market's peaks and valleys perfectly. Housel's point, backed by tons of data, is that success in investing doesn't really hinge on that kind of pinpoint timing.
So what does it hinge on?
Time in the market. Just staying invested, consistently, for long enough to let compounding work. His advice is clear. Stop trying to dance in and out. You risk interrupting that powerful compounding process for no good reason most of the time. Just stay put.
But life happens, right? Things go wrong, markets crash, we lose jobs. So we need room for error. How do we build that safety net Housel talks about?
It's absolutely critical because life is unpredictable. Surprises, both good and bad, are inevitable. Housel stresses you must build in a margin of safety into your financial plans.
What does that look like practically? Oversaving, lower expectations.
It can be a mix. Maybe it's saving more than you think you'll need. Maybe it's assuming lower investment returns than historical averages. Maybe it's avoiding strategies that only work if everything goes perfectly according to plan, the best case scenario.
So don't rely on everything going right.
Never. Always assume something will go wrong. Plan for it. Build in buffers. It's not being pessimistic. Housel would say it's just being realistic and building a plan that can survive contact with reality.
Okay, let's dive into some of the trickier human stuff. Our own psychology, ego, envy, comparison. Housel makes this kind of depressing observation. You'll never feel rich. Why is that? Even when people accumulate a lot, they often don't feel wealthy.
Yeah, it's a real human tendency, isn't it? The goalposts just keep moving. You reach a certain income or net worth, and almost immediately that target escalates. Or you start comparing yourself to someone who has more.
The hedonic treadmill, basically, applied to money.
Exactly. Without a really clear, conscious definition of what enough means for you personally, that feeling of satisfaction, the feeling rich, it just is elusive. You're always chasing the next thing, comparing yourself upwards.
And speaking of psychological traps, what about the seduction of pessimism? Why does bad news or a negative forecast often sound, well, smarter or more credible than optimism?
It's weird, right? Pessimism often comes across as more intellectual, somehow. Like the person delivering the bad news is the clear-eyed realist, the wise sage warning us. Optimism, on the other hand, can sometimes sound naive or even like someone's trying to sell you something.
Like they're ignoring the risks.
Right. But Housel's point is, while you absolutely need to acknowledge risks, that's the room for error bit, if you look at the long sweep of history, the world generally does get better. Economies grow, innovation happens, progress continues. A constantly pessimistic outlook, while sounding sophisticated, often blinds you to the huge opportunities and growth that happen over time. Be wary of narratives that sound smart, but consistently miss the bigger, usually positive long-term trend.
It all seems to circle back to patience again, doesn't it? Like his lesson, wealth is what you leave alone, especially regarding investments.
It's so simple, yet so hard. The core message is just let your investments do their thing. They need time. Time to grow, time to compound. Don't fiddle with them constantly.
Resist the urge to tinker.
Resist the urge. Don't panic sell during downturns. Don't chase the latest hot stock. Just, as Housel puts it, let the tree grow. The real insight, I think, is acknowledging how incredibly difficult this inactivity is for our brains. We want to do something, but often the best action is no action.
Okay, shifting slightly again, let's look at how personal finance connects to other parts of life. Housel talks about confounding, compounding. What's the connection he's drawing there?
Yeah, this is really interesting. He draws this powerful parallel between good investing and other areas where small, consistent efforts lead to huge long-term results. Think about health and fitness, or building good habits, or even mastering a skill.
It's rarely about one giant leap.
Almost never. The common thread isn't some flash of genius or one dramatic breakthrough. It's usually about painstaking consistency, just showing up day after day, doing the small things, even when it's boring.
So the mundane stuff adds up.
Massively. The insight is that the biggest returns in finance, much like the biggest improvements in life, often come from that relentless consistency, not necessarily from being the smartest person in the room.
And that consistency should be focused inward, right? Not outward.
Which brings us to independence over impressing. Spending money to impress other people, often a waste of time and money.
Oh, totally. It's often completely futile. We buy things we don't need to impress people who, frankly, are probably not paying nearly as much attention as we think they are. They're busy worrying about what other people think of them.
Right. Everyone's the main character in their own movie.
Exactly. So Housel encourages you. Prioritize your own financial independence. That real control over your life, your choices, that's infinitely more valuable and lasting than any fleeting impression you might make with a fancy watch or car. Seeking that external validation through spending is usually a trap that actually prevents you from achieving real freedom.
Which leads nicely to the maybe less glamorous but ultimately more reliable path. Getting wealthy slowly. Yeah, the slow path definitely lacks the drama, doesn't it? No exciting headlines about getting rich overnight. But Housel argues that slow, steady wealth accumulation is just inherently more stable. It's more sustainable, more resilient to shocks.
Compared to fast money.
Right. Fast money, the kind made quickly through maybe high-risk speculation or some lucky break, it often disappears just as quickly. That steady, consistent, sometimes, yeah, kind of boring approach. That's what tends to build wealth that lasts, maybe even for generations. It's the tortoise beating the hare every time in the long run.
Okay, let's wrap up with perhaps the most philosophical part. The idea of enough and seeing money simply as a tool. Housel calls enough the gold standard. Why is defining enough so critical?
Because it's the key to actual satisfaction. It really is the ultimate benchmark for financial peace, I think. Housel urges all of us, to actively sit down and define what enough looks like for you.
Your personal finish line?
Your personal finish line. Because without that clear definition, you'll always feel like you need more. You'll be stuck on that comparison treadmill forever, and genuine contentment will just stay out of reach. The insight is profound. Satisfaction doesn't come from more, it comes from having enough based on your own values.
And when you're figuring out your enough and your strategy, it's vital to remember you're not alone in the game. But crucially, you're not playing the same game as everyone else either.
Oh, this is such an important warning. Don't just blindly copy what someone else is doing with their money. You have no idea about their actual goals, their real risk tolerance, their unique life situation, maybe even their hidden debts or advantages.
Your game is different.
Their game is totally different. Housel's advice is sharp. Beware taking financial cues from people playing a different game than you. Your financial plan needs to be tailored to your life, your goals, your comfort level, not just mimicking someone you see on Instagram or your neighbor.
So after all this, all these lessons about behavior, luck, patience, enough, how does Housel ultimately frame money itself? He says simply, money is a tool.
Yeah, he really brings it back to basics. Money isn't the end goal. It's not something to accumulate just for the sake of having the biggest pile. It's a tool.
A means to an end.
Exactly, a means to an end. It's a tool that can buy you things, yes, but more importantly, it can facilitate peace of mind. It can buy you time. It can grant you freedom, options, security. The real value isn't just in having more money, but in using it wisely, using it effectively to achieve what truly matters to you in your life. It's an enabler, not the ultimate prize.
Wow. What a journey through the psychology of money. It really hammers home that core truth, doesn't it? Financial success.
Yeah.
It's just not primarily about the numbers or the economic forecast.
No, it's overwhelmingly about us, our emotions, our biases, our mindsets, our habits, our behaviors, day in and day out. Housel puts that number on it, right? Like 90% behavior, only 10% knowledge.
Yeah, 90-10. That's huge.
It really is.
Yeah.
And the key takeaways are those behavioral traits, aren't they?
Yeah.
Cultivating patience, practicing humility, maybe embracing a bit of frugality, understanding compounding, and just staying invested, staying in your seat for the long haul, not trying to constantly outsmart everyone.
Time in the market, not timing the market.
That's the mantra.
And it makes me think. If Housel masterfully shows us how to protect and grow wealth by understanding our own minds, it kind of connects beautifully to someone like Napoleon Hill, right, from Think and Grow Rich. Hill was all about how to attract wealth in the first place, also starting with the mind.
That's a great connection. Hill's famous line, whatever the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve. It's the same fundamental principle, just maybe from a different angle.
It all starts upstairs.
It absolutely does. Housel reveals it through the lens of behavior and psychology. Money, wealth, it fundamentally begins in the mind. The right mindset, the right attitude, and then backing that up with consistent, deliberate behaviors. Those are the real architects of wealth that doesn't just appear, but actually lasts.
So maybe the thought to leave everyone with as you reflect on all this is, it's not just about making money. Lots of people do that. It's about making money make sense for you in your life. And that journey, it all starts with how you think.